us in a discussion we'll be leading today, organized by FES on the prospects of the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue by doing an analysis of how did this all take place during the Trump era and what hopes are there for what is going to happen with this dialogue during the Biden era and the impact of the US election in the dialogue. Before we continue, let me just lay down a few rules. We are going to have a discussion where only the panelists involved in this conversation are allowed to speak, but we will be taking questions which will come to us in two forums, in Zoom chat line, where people will be able to send via chat. You can send us questions and comments, and I will try to summarize those questions. And second, from the Facebook of kalzop.com, where this conversation is being also broadcasted, from the Facebook, we'll be able to take questions for you and put them to the panelists. For now, I want to introduce everybody who will be speaking in this discussion. We will have first opening remarks by René Schle, the FES Kosovo country director. Then we will have the opening remarks of Mr. Max Vendle, the head of FES Serbia country director. And I'm very honored to have then this discussion followed up by Mr. Milan Antonijević from Belgrade, and who will be speaking to us from Belgrade, and Mr. Vetos Roy from Pristina. So before taking more of your time, and roughly this conversation will in maximum take place for an hour and a half. Before me taking more of this hour and a half, I would ask for Mr. René Schle as a new Kosovo, not so old, but a few months new FES country director to give us opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Jeta, for this very kind introduction. As you already introduced me, my name is René Schle. I'm the new head of office of here, the representation of Friedrich Ebert Stiftung in Kosovo. As such, it is my utmost delight to have this joint discussion on the post-US election in close cooperation with our office in Belgrade, Serbia, with my colleague, Dr. Max Brendle. And I would just like to welcome you to this discussion. I think we have managed to find quite distinguished voices by distinguished experts who will tell us, both taking a look back and what the year has been so far. It was quite a turbulent year when we think of the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue. But then more importantly, of course, as we have a new president-elect, to take a look at the future. What is there to, what are the shape of things to come? When it comes, first of all, I'm very happy that we're having this discussion 1 week after the election, because, and not 2 or 3 days later, because well, it took quite some time until the election results then came in. So now it's official. We have a new president-elect, Mr. Joe Biden. And as we've seen in this year, it makes quite a difference who sits in the White Office, what kind of special envoys are nominated for the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue. So I'm very much looking forward to the discussion, and I hand it over to my colleague, Max.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeta. Thank you, René. I'm Max Brendle. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our event for the post-US election and on the future and prospects of the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue. We are here in Belgrade in the office of Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, where we have set up this little studio for this event. I'm here with Milan Antonijević, who will be joining us with his comments on the topic. Friedrich Ebert Stiftung has set up the office in Belgrade 24 years ago, in 1996 already, and we are here to support our social values, our social democratic values, and a pro-European path for Serbia and all the countries in the region. For me personally, it came as a relief when I heard that Joe Biden has made the race and is going to be the next president on the 20th of January of next year. And Joe Biden is a Democrat. And we can take this in a literal sense. He stands for democracy in the United States. And he stands for multilateralism. And he stands for the opportunity to find a common approach to our common challenges between us in Europe and our partners in the United States. I say it is an opportunity to find a common approach because it is not going to be so simple. Things will not simply flip back to the status quo ante before the previous 4 years and the Trump administration. So let us see what we can make of this opportunity for us together in Europe and the United States and beyond. And today we have the opportunity to discuss this here in Belgrade and in Pristina together with experts and our organizations of the challenges we face in the region for a European path for Southeast Europe to join the European Union as full member states, to see where this will bring us together as Europeans and especially for the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue. And I'm really grateful that we can do this together, and I hope that all the technology will work and we'll be able to have an interesting discussion and learn from each other. Thank you very much.
The next part of the discussion, I want to concentrate basically on two phases as the agenda is spread. Looking at what is your analysis and what happened for 4 years of Trump administration in terms of leadership for dialogue? And then we will go and discuss the future with Biden. So Mr. Antonievich, for those who are watching this and don't know him, Mr. Antonievich is head of Open Society Foundation in Serbia, and is a renowned lawyer who worked with many international organizations prior to joining the Open Society Foundation. So first, you have 10 minutes, Mr. Antonievich, to analyze what happened during Trump. How fruitful was it, was the whole leadership of the dialogue during Trump era?
Yeah, first to thank you to host me, and then to say that things that were happening at the end with the Washington agreement were about the same length of 10 minutes when we have this finalization of a small agreement made and points that was signed in between President Vučić and Hoti. That's something that can maybe sum up the long years of wandering between Brussels and the U.S. with a very strong final push from the U.S. to use the momentum, and to have something that was signed and was more in line with the current at that time campaign for a presidential campaign. Not so much reflecting to the region, aside of the economic benefits that the region can have from the things signed. But we wanted also during these years to see better cooperation between the EU envoy Miroslav Lajčák and the US. However, no matter how Brussels was trying to be in line with the US policy to exchange, I believe that the answer from Washington at that time and the administration was not that cooperative. This is something that we are now expecting will change, and we expect that it will be a good chance to really re-establish these cross-Atlantic relations, that we have envoys that are cooperating. Today I spoke in the office. I'm not sure whether the envoy can be someone who is not a US citizen, so maybe even asking Mr. Lajčák to be US envoy. But not to make the situation that's very hard even harder. But we are at the moment just assessing what the results are. Still in DC, we do not have the clear signals where the policy will lead, but it will be much stronger. It will be much more dedicated to the real conflict and the frozen conflict that is existing in between Serbia and Kosovo. We expect that the results will be more landing to our region that has quite a lot of challenges than to the international scene where the whole previous administration was leading the talks in between Belgrade and Pristina. So we're as optimistic as one can be. I'm sitting on this side on the blue side, not to be too undiplomatic. But we know that within the future administration there will be quite a lot of knowledge accumulated, also during Biden's visits to the region, previous tasks. But something that we want to share and to offer is enormous expertise that is lying in the civil society, in Belgrade and in Pristina, and to hope that the voice from the ground, from the civil society, will be joined in order to strengthen the dialogue, in order to strengthen the mission, first from Brussels, and to see what US is offering and putting on the table, and to give a little bit of new breath to the Brussels agreement, and not to have disputes as we had in previous times. So lack of communication in between Washington and Brussels is something that we should not tolerate, as much as we should not tolerate the lack of communication between our politicians in Belgrade and in Pristina. We saw the effects of the today's summit in Sofia. There are also some messages that we are quite unhappy with, that are related to the larger region of the Western Balkans. So the negative message by Bulgaria related to North Macedonia accession. So all of these things should be analyzed, and they should be analyzed also in the policy of the US. They should be analyzed in the future strong messages that we should expect, with concrete deadlines, with concrete outcomes, outputs, and this final agreement, comprehensive agreement that we should not lose from our side. So we expect also US to be strong supporter of EU accession of both countries. We expect them to be also advocating for economic reforms to continue where the Washington agreement stopped. Jetta, please stop me if I'm going to other questions that you will be opening during the talks, but it's really hard to analyze the four-year policy that was not quite present on the ground, and with a lot of surprises, especially the last surprise we got from the Washington agreement, where, as I mentioned, we had quite a lot of points that have not much to do with the region and its current frozen conflict, but much more with the wider region, as related to Israel, as related to Hamas, as related to also oil supplies and those supply chains that we're unfortunately losing from our sites, that they should be more European and less coming from some other side. But these economic effects should be, I think, granted. I think they should get really a positive message from all of us, saying that things are a bit moved by the Washington agreement, at least summing up things that were previously there on the table and reiterating them in a document that gave us a bit of new hope, especially for the transport and other things that will be developed in the region. I'm a lawyer, so I also care about rule of law and fundamental rights. I also care about democracy, and this is something that we can much more expect in the region to be forced than in previous times, and I believe that will be the major change that is expected and welcomed by those who would like to see a region reforming and approaching the EU in the right pace, not to substitute Hungary or Poland as a new troublemaker, but also to be a champion, if possible, in that race for the rule of law and democracy. So I'm not having a time, so I don't know whether I exhausted my 10 minutes or I should use 2 times a minute, as much as our president said that he met Trump after losing the elections. Previously it was a bit longer period that they spent together, but still, I mean,
thank you, Mr. Antonievich, for this opening presentation. And now, if there are people who don't know Mr. Suroi, he's the founder of Koha Media House in Kosovo, which is a newspaper, TV station, and publishing house. But more relevant to this conversation, he has been involved representing Kosovo delegation in negotiations since '99 as a part of the Rambouillet Kosovo team, which the Rambouillet process, which then preceded the NATO bombing. So, Mr. Suroi, it's been now almost 3 decades that you've been thinking about issues of Kosovo-Serbia dialogue and been involved in many ways. Like, if you were asked to summarize in this long experience you have, to summarize only the last 4 years of Trump administration, like any progress of fruitfulness or none that was made, how would you summarize these 4 years? Can you put the mic on, Veton? I think we lost you for a second. You might have a mute. I can't hear you. I could hear you previously, and I'm looking forward to hearing you again.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, is this better?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. President Trump's presidency has been unorthodox throughout all the issues. And of course, it's been unorthodox on the Kosovo-Serbia negotiations. President Trump entered the White House as a disruptor. And this is something self-proclaimed, actually. Both him and Grenell have repeated many times that they want to disrupt the way the foreign policy and all other policies have functioned in the U.S. In modern times, in the past 20 years, there's been basically or maybe even more, but let's focus on this past decade. There's been a policy of disruption that was equal on the other side of the Atlantic only in Russia. Russian policy has been one of disruption of the Western democracies. There was a point of coincidence between President Trump and Russia on other issues, but not necessarily on this one overtly. The second point, which is, I think, necessary to put on the table, is that President Trump entered this disruption with a clear and open declaration that the transatlantic values and the transatlantic relations, such as they were not going to be under his presidency. And this is something that he made overtly clear. Kosovo is a child of good transatlantic relations. And the peace in the Balkans was possible only with a strong transatlantic relationship. So when President Trump said he was not going to have none of it, he basically sent a negative message to the region in general. The third element, which is necessary, is that the U.S. plays the role of the indispensable power in Europe during and after the Second World War. And the present configuration, both in terms of NATO and the EU, would not have been possible without U.S. presence and U.S. leadership at many times. in the past, not only 4, but throughout the decade, the EU has not been very good in negotiating between Kosovo and Serbia. First, we had the Brussels process, initiated the Brussels Agreement in 2013. And for many years, they've been dealing basically on non-issues, on irrelevant issues. And so a whole decade has been spent. A whole decade in European negotiations, it would not have been spent had there been a strong American leadership. Now, to be fair, it was not Mr. President Trump who said, let Europe take over this issue. It was actually President Obama who did this, and so President Trump continued. But without a U.S. leadership, this negotiating process could have continued for long. The fourth element which is necessary is that there's a distribution of labor between the US and the EU, and the US usually takes the hardware, the hard stuff, the hard security stuff. And the EU is the soft power, the one who arranges the economic relations, etc. In the Washington so-called agreement, which was never an agreement, the US assumed a role that was usually one of the European Union, roads, telecommunications, railways, infrastructure, enhancing economic cooperation, something that is very close to the European idea of integration. But the US took over that agenda, at the same time dismissing its role in dealing with the hard issues, which is basically that you cannot deal with economic integration unless you deal with the relationship between the state of Serbia and the state of Kosovo. And unless that is solved, it will be very difficult to see how all the other issues will go. But the Trump administration, despite sending a letter to President Vučić and President Tači at the time, 2 years ago, and saying, welcome to the Rose Garden, sit down, and we'll talk about both of you recognizing each other and establishing peace. President Trump, in his, one should say, lack of knowledge, and he does not lack knowledge only on the Kosovo-Serbia issue, it's not an exemption, but President Trump, in his lack of knowledge, lost an opportunity in inviting Kosovo and Serbia to deal with issues that were already being dealt in the Berlin process. For example, the roads or the railways or things like that are not something that had not been discussed before. And there was no need to go to Washington and do that big show in order to say that there will be a road that is already being built anyway by the European Union and Serbia itself towards the Kosovo border. So a golden opportunity was spent a silver bullet was spent, the Washington silver bullet that solves the big issues, the big hard issues of sovereignty, of mutual recognition, etc. And instead of that, President Trump actually created a bigger mess out of it by actually having Serbia not really deal with the hard issues, and Kosovo taking a detour in thinking that the strongest result out of it was the recognition of Israel, which is important, but it's not something that changes the game. President Trump additionally made a big problem out of this whole situation by identifying Kosovo as a Muslim state that suddenly recognizes Israel, something that is totally contrary to the whole movement of independence of Kosovo. And furthermore, there was an additional problem in the perception of a U.S. administration when the president goes out and says Serbs and Albanians have been killing each other for 400 years, and in 20 minutes I've solved that situation, which not only shows lack of knowledge, it also shows lack of respect for an evolution of U.S. foreign policy in the Balkans in the past 30 years. It's not been a a clear path. It's not been an easy path. It took a lot of leadership, especially and it was bipartisan. It was both Republican and Democrat. It reached to a point in which we are still at a stalemate. There's still a problem being open. And putting these things in simplistic terms, as President Trump did, he did not do a favor neither to the parties nor to the possibility of reaching an agreement soon.
This brings us to, this is a more nuanced view, Veton, than what I've heard so far in terms of you evaluating that it's a whole decade of lost opportunity. Whether it's from EU and US, it doesn't matter. It's a whole decade. And
well, it does matter. It does matter.
Yeah, and precisely what does this make us hope for the next 4 years? If we are to go to the second part of this conversation as predicted in the agenda, if you also just very rightly so evaluated that under Obama and Biden as a team, the leadership of the dialogue was allowed to stagnate. What do you expect for the next 4 years?
Me or Milan?
You go first because that's how you are in the agenda. You go first in the second discussion.
Okay.
So you went first in the previous one.
Okay. Okay. I think what is extremely important is that somebody of very great experience as Joe Biden assumes the presidency. He's probably the most knowledgeable of the people in the administration overall. And I'm not speaking of the White House only, I'm speaking of people in the Congress as well. I've known Joe Biden since 1994, when he was dealing with Bosnia at the time, and he was a very lonely voice in Bosnia. It was him and Senator Dole and some other people on both sides, but you could number them in the fingers of one hand. So he knows about the issue and about the region, and he will probably bring with him people who also know about it, diplomats who know about it. Joe Biden's heart is in the right place. He's a man for peace. He's a man for accords. He's a very strong transatlantic person. So I think he will be a great team with the leadership in Europe. So these are the good news. The less good news is that you cannot go into the status quo ante, because there is no status quo ante. Even before Trump, we had a policy of President Obama, which was looking into the Pacific rather than into all the other issues. And so it's not President Trump who's been looking into China. It's actually President Obama who started this. Of course, I'm not speaking in intellectual terms and their capacity. I'm just thinking in terms of strategic views. And so we will not be returning to status quo ante. I think the US will, of course, want a stronger EU leadership on this issue. And I think it will be coming. But I think it will be very important for Biden, who also has a very strong NATO instinct, to put the limits of Russia's disruptive force in Europe, and especially in the Balkans, where Russia has a long history of disrupting with very low investments and very high returns. So we will be having a bit of return to hard issues from the US administration in very strong dynamic with the EU leaders. Now, the EU itself is, of course, in re-identifying itself and its forces. It will be very encouraging, I think. What will, of course, be something to have in mind is that in the next 6 months, at least, we will have a transition in the US, which means we will not have a functioning administration probably as usually until April or May. and therefore you will not see a lot of activity from that side. And on the other side, we already have here a problem because we have two totally different dynamics between Kosovo and Serbia. We have a very strongly stabilized, one would say over strongly stabilized Serbia, and we have a destabilized Kosovo. So we have a big difference in representation and capabilities of both sides in a negotiating process. And you cannot have a successful negotiating process with this kind of asymmetry between Kosovo and Serbia.
So how does Kosovo become stabilized if that's what is needed to proceed with this dialogue?
Well, it will have to stabilize, it will have to recreate a degree of, not recreate, but create a degree of legitimacy that is strong enough to carry on with a negotiating process. And there are only two ways around it. And that one is if there's suddenly out of the blue, a consensus within the society that suddenly gives a strong political support to this or any new government, or if there is going to be a new electoral process that will create new legitimacy.
Yeah, thanks. And Mr. Antonijevic, you spoke about being very blue yourself personally as you're sitting in that position visually, but many Serbs do not feel like that. So I want to talk about what are your hopes for next 4 years when to simplify it, because of Biden's knowledge of the region, that he's been coming to Bosnia and Kosovo since '93. Many Serbs see him as very much favoring the victims of Serbia, the victims of the wars, the 5 wars that Serbia went to. So how do you see this will reflect in the future Kosovo-Serbia dialogue? Will Serbia engage with Biden's administration?
Good. First, to correct you, I'm not blue nor blonde. I'm more ginger. I don't know how it reflects in here, but I believe that the upcoming 4 years will show that illusions on having a strong partner on one or the other side will be gone. We need somebody who knows both aspects. We saw that U.S. can react on Serbian policy that's starting wars and being engaged in it. But also we saw U.S. very actively involved in the issue of missing persons, and something that really is a burden on both sides, if I may say so. So there are a lot of issues that where U.S. showed that it can be an honest broker. And we expect the administration to be as strong as objective, to use the opportunity that is opened in some ways, to use also its leverage to push our leaders to promote understanding in between Serbia and Kosovo, so that we speak about possible outcome in Serbia, so that the public is prepared to some of the changes that will be coming. If I may use some words that Beton used, and that's the silver bullet. If we explain the former policy of Trump related to Brussels and its engagement, I believe that the U.S. used its silver bullet to kill the Brussels negotiation position as a mediator. We expect this not to happen in the future in the future negotiations. That we expect to have a very strong and very coherent policy in between U.S. and Brussels, and there is a possibility for using that silver bullet to use it for this frozen conflict that's really a burden for both Serbia and Kosovo. We also have to analyze the policies of Serbian policy here, also the policy in Pristina. What are the possibilities for for the forces to be, as Veton described, to make that kind of consensus on the negotiations. That's well needed. This is needed in the parliament. In Serbia, we have this strange situation that the parliament is not having different voices. We have only 6 members of the parliament that are out of 250 that we can call the opposition. We have a large percentage of our society being out of this voting and having their also voices. On Kosovo, we also are expecting consensus. We expect a bit of different voices. And that's where we can rely also, as I mentioned previously. I'm more insisting because I come from the civil society. I know what the values are and how much it can move together with media, together with academia, with the cooperation, with also these circular migrations that are being promoted in the new initiatives of Mini Schengen and many others, so that people are starting to cooperate not only on economic level but also on other levels, so that we make the frozen conflict not an option for as large percentage of the population in Serbia and Kosovo. So that
Milan, may I just be the devil's advocate here, because I know all of us are part of civil society. Veton, you certainly, but what has this shown to people? What do you say to cynics who say you're asking for DC not to kill the Brussels policy? Mm-hmm. You're asking for a coherent policy between Brussels and Washington. But in the past, from 2011, it is precisely this coherence that was present. Yet, even with this coherence, even with previous Serbian government, Mr. Tadic, and with Vučić, and previous many prime ministers in Kosovo that have been the last decades, it did not show any fruit. So what do you say to cynics who say, well, the coherence between these two states, it's not like it brought any fruit in this dialogue to finish it off, to finish off the final agreement? So what is the proof in the pudding, as the saying goes, that coherence will necessarily bring a solution, final agreement?
First, yesterday we spoke with Lajčák. We had also a meeting. We have to analyze the whole process that the Brussels is leading at the moment. This is the dialogue that will be open by the end. So it will not be bit by bit, like piece, like the initial Brussels dialogue was held. It will be a deal that is negotiated well. With all the aspects, so that when we have the signature on that document, all the open issues are resolved. This is very open.
And how long do you envisage, how long do you predict this will take?
We also have to take into consideration internal policies. We have to take into consideration elections that will be held, probably presidential election for sure in 2022. What are the possibilities, where those windows are, when the US administration is fully formed and operational, but we're pushing for the speed, not in order to cover up some of the things, but to use the momentum when we have a possibility to open the discussion in the society, when we also are expecting the same from the society in Kosovo to open all of the issues. But a bit to question your devil's advocate role, the Brussels Agreement made significant changes in the judiciary. It made significant changes in parallel institutions, in some of the things that were blocking the talks for years. These changes are visible. We also have the agreement on the Serbian Association of Municipalities that was agreed but not implemented. I believe that without the support from the US, at that moment it was not implementable. But things can change. We can put back all these things on the table. Not to undermine the things that are signed, anyway, if not signed, but they are in the documents that are agreed on the Brussels dialogue, and not to undermine all those steps that were made, and to continue from that position and opening all of those that were open. We saw that the missing persons are are an issue that is high on the agenda. You have the Association of Missing Persons in Serbia, also the associations in Kosovo, who are cooperating in between each other because they have the same issue that's mobilizing them to be active in the society, and that kind of things will be also visible in the final agreement, comprehensive agreement that we're expecting. So I'm an optimist. I don't know if you saw it, the dialogue that I was leading together with my colleagues and later on with European Parliament on the elections and then conditions show that we're quite big optimists. But the optimism, when you add to it a lot of work and a lot of groundwork, it can produce results. And this is something that we're currently advocating. And not to forget one word, I have it here on my pencil. It is the trust in Serbian poverenje. By the end of the discussion today, I hope I will learn the Albanian word poverenje, because that's something we need. We need it in between the civil society. We need it in between our journalists in the region who are cooperating, exchanging information, covering up stories in Belgrade and in Pristina together, but on the local level. We should expect our opposition to be active with their counterparts in Pristina. We should expect ruling parties who are members. Who are members of the same political affiliations, European affiliations, to be actively cooperating.
Besim is the word. Besim is the word.
Okay.
Veton, do you share Milan's optimism about what happened? That not everything that happened last 10 years is so dark. That that actually the coherence between Brussels and Washington has given fruit in the last 10 years.
Well, in the last 10 years, they had the lowest common denominator. And the lowest common denominator is when you have bureaucrats who want to congratulate themselves, is to say there's no war. And as long as there's no war, then it's a success. But it is a bit, I think it's a bit derogatory for the people of Kosovo and of Serbia, because I think to a great extent, there's not this kind of tense situation that leads to war. There's a lack of cooperation, there's lack of sense of direction, and that lack of sense of leadership from the European Union has been visible throughout the decade. There's been, once you have an agreement that they say, you have this historical agreement in 2013, if it were historical, why hasn't it been implemented? If it's historical, why hasn't it transformed? If it's historical, why does it take 7 years to reach to the next agreement or whatever it's going to happen? So the devil lays in the details, and there's a lot of self-congratulations in Brussels continuously, which basically is due to lack of transparency as well. These, for many years, I was talking to diplomats in the capitals of Europe, of member states, and they were complaining more than I was on, for example, on Mrs. Mogherini not informing them of what she was intending to do concerning, for example, exchange of territories, which Mr. Vučić and Mr. Thaci were pursuing with her acknowledgement.
Precisely, would you know to tell us, Veton, why is this lack of ambition in Brussels to go beyond symbolism, considering that Kosovo and Serbia are so close to Europe? It's not rocket science to know these two countries, and why is there such lack of ambition to go beyond symbolism?
Well, because there was lack of leadership in Kosovo. Kosovo acknowledged from the beginning that they would get into a negotiating process with whatever is being asked from them. So Kosovo failed miserably, or its leadership failed miserably, its own people, throughout the decade. Second, the negotiators were finding themselves in a very difficult situation, the mediators, because there were two things that were happening. The first one was there was no mutual recognition. So it was not about normalizing relations between two countries that have recognized each other's sovereignty, but actually these are two countries that have a dispute of sovereignty. And the second was there were 5 countries that did not recognize Kosovo within the European Union. So a mediator from the European Union had to wear 2 hats. He had to wear the hat of recognizing countries, and he had to wear a hat of non-recognizing countries. And in clinical psychology, this is called schizophrenia, and in politics as well.
So this schizophrenia continues. Everything you just said continues to be inherited by future EU leadership. Any advice how they don't make the same mistake over and over again, considering that we still have a weak leadership in Kosovo then?
Well, we will have a weak leadership in Kosovo until we have a strong leadership. That's just the law of physics.
But there will still be a future negotiator, even with a strong leadership, will be inheriting 5 non-recognizers in Europe, no mutual recognition. This dispute will continue. So he's still impaired by these arguments.
Good.
It will be, but the question is this: do you want to have an agreement, or do you want to spend time? If you want to spend time, you can spend time for the next decade inventing Mickey Mouse agreements, which cannot be implemented, or which require more negotiations to be implemented. The question is, I think the parameters of the future agreement are actually happening today, or these days. The first one is the return of NATO. NATO has to enter as a stabilizing force for for stabilizing Europe. Europe is not stable. Of course, it's not the NATO of 1950 or 70 or 80s. It's the NATO in which the European Union, without Britain now, has to assume more responsibilities. And this is very important because Britain is a very important member of NATO, and in Kosovo it was a very strong stabilizing force, and in the European Union it was a very strong voice in terms of political issues that have to deal with Southeastern Europe or Eastern Europe in general. So that's the first issue, is actually we have to go back to the basics of stability, of transatlantic stability. And the second is something that Chancellor Merkel and President Macron just actually initiated, which didn't receive any publicity at all. It's probably the least of the news today, that the leaders of the 6 Western Balkan countries actually signed or declared that they would adopt a common market. And that is extremely important. It sounds a bit silly in Zoom meetings, and it sounds a bit silly because it happened in a summit between Bulgaria and North Macedonia, in which 3 days before the summit, they were fighting each other on the identity of the North Macedonians and their language, etc. But nevertheless, it shows strategic thinking in Brussels, in Berlin, and in Paris about the future. And the future of the region is basically a Visegrad type of operation, with the caveat that it's a Visegrad with at least 2 unfinished conflicts, which is Kosovo and Serbia, and the constitutional relationship between Bosnia and Herzegovina, between the people in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the identity of Bosnia and Herzegovina itself. So this is an extremely important framework. It is, of course, extremely ambitious, and it will require a lot of leadership.
Actually, I was going to ask you about the Schengen meeting today, the online meeting, and I understand the leaders of Serbia, Albania, and North Macedonia Macedonia, when they held this online meeting for the mini Schengen initiative, they signed yesterday a deal that allows citizens of these 3 countries to move freely with ID cards. Now, what I understand is that Kosovo PM did not participate in the mini Schengen meeting. Now, is it a sign for you, Veton, and I'll move with the same question with Milan, that the DC agreement in which Kosovo Prime Minister signed a commitment to participate in the Schengen meetings is nullified, and Kosovo is again not part of the Schengen meetings?
It's not nullified, but it's it's a misnamed process anyway. It's not. There's nothing have to do with mini Schengen or anything like that.
For you, it's a West Balkan meeting, clearly, right?
Yeah, it's what we have had today. You know, the commitment today. If you see the paper that was presented to the parties by Merkel and Macron, you have basically an agreement that creates an adjacent area of 4 European freedoms, preparing themselves for the European Union for freedoms. So if you want to look at it conceptually, now we have a very wide framework that needs to be filled with a lot of content and a lot of creativity, because we are facing, as I say, unfinished states and unfinished conflicts. You have incomplete states in Kosovo, Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, who have not finished their constitutional identity or have not defined their sovereignty. And we have unfinished conflict with Kosovo and Serbia. For as long as Kosovo and Serbia do not sign a cooperation agreement, a peace and cooperation agreement for the future, they will remain objectively open to conflict. And this is something that neither state needs. So the Washington agreements had their value for, I think, that moment, for the moment when it was signed, for the pictures, especially for the very unorthodox pictures of a president putting like kids in front of the school teacher, the prime minister and the president of 2 countries, which he said stopped killing each other and kissed each other there at the meeting. And then it had the value of going to Milwaukee or wherever he was saying that he stopped the 400 years of killing and deserves a peace prize. It was never a well-thought plan. It was an improvisation, the way the whole foreign policy of the U.S. has continuously been improvised throughout these 4 years.
Some Kosovars, Veton would say, it got Kosovo the Israeli recognition.
Yes, of course. No, I'm not saying you should throw everything out, and neither did Milan. You know, there are things the U.S. wants to help with the highway, or U.S. wants to help with this or the other things. It's very, very welcome, but it's using the rocket to the moon to fly to Hawaii. You don't use that kind of energy, strength that you have to do things which can be done by other people, especially other people who are accustomed to it. You know, the whole idea of the Berlin process was actually to instigate this kind of cooperation, to open this kind of cooperation, because it's the European Union itself that saw that when you open up the infrastructure, when you create corridors of communication, when you create commerce, etc., then it helps. The problem, of course, with Kosovo and Serbia is that kind of neoliberal thinking of, expand markets, expand the economy, and then suddenly peace will arrive, does not happen. Kosovo was an open market for Serbian goods. It increased almost to 800 million euros before Prime Minister Haradinaj imposed a tax on these goods. But it did not bring more peace, or it did not bring more cooperation, or it did not bring a future agreement. It actually pushed two sides further aside, which is an important lesson that you need to solve political issues. It's not sufficient to open up corridors and which are very necessary and very good, but you need to solve the hard issues. And the hard issues are very hard. They have to deal not only with identity, they have to deal with reconciliation, they have to deal with memory of the past, and all of them put together. And these are not very easy issues at all.
I want to ask you about, Milan, about this concept of that the leaderships in both countries, especially that in Serbia, can also just spend time and not sign agreements. We're all looking forward to a final or comprehensive mutual recognition agreement. But what is it in it for Serbia to actually sign one now when it's not as close to entering European Union? Isn't it in the incentive of largely nationally driven leaderships in Serbia to just continue endlessly into dialogue until there is a clear entry date of Serbia into Europe? What do you see is the carrot that EU and EU leadership can use on Serbia to impose a final agreement which would bring recognition of Kosovo? Is any future leadership, current or future leadership of Serbia, going to sign anything like that before they enter the EU?
Final comprehensive agreement is something that is on the table. I believe that the Brussels is only aiming at that, so not going for any other document that will be signed, and that this is the clear message that we got. So it will not be a process where you can have an agreement without signing, where both sides will have some kind of possibility to endorse a document. We need something that is much more than that. What is there for Serbia? I believe that there is also a very big knowledge in the society that the frozen conflict is leaving some other issues opened and endlessly opened. One of them is the rule of law. Also, direct foreign investments are cannot be erased in a country that still has open or frozen conflict on its borders. So there are a lot of incentives that we need to raise in order to get trust that the current leadership is ready. They also learned some lessons from the previous leadership. I mean, Boris Tadic having a really strong discontent from the EU leaders on his waging the possibility to support processes of negotiations. I believe it cost him quite a lot at that moment, and I'm really glad to see that there is, I think, more and more becoming a coherent and very strong voices coming from Berlin and from Paris that also Veton mentioned, now reflected in Sofia, in the agreement signed there. But we can also expect it to be very active in these, giving not just the DC and the Washington support to the Brussels in its talks, but also getting the strength from the two big capitals that would like to be global players and players, especially in the EU. So we can expect these politics to be more and much more clearly stated, much more clearly visible in the agenda that Miroslav Lajčák will be promoting or putting on the table. But the comprehensive agreement is something that's needed. That's something that we can put on the table also to our leaders for the current issues we have in COVID situation, and many things being blurred and much more different for citizens of Serbia. We're much more, I hope that we're becoming more and more realistic policy-wise, that the life is not that long, that we can endlessly negotiate and extend the processes that have to be ending, where we have also strong commitments from both sides, but also the gain from both sides. We cannot have winners and losers of neither of the agreements that will be coming either from Washington or from Brussels. Whoever is expecting that in the region is not wishing well to the future agreement and is putting us much further from the final and comprehensive agreement.
I'm going to ask you, Milan, a tricky question, but
as usual, yeah.
There's a lot of curiosity of people who even from Kosovo and from international community in this answer. What do you think a leader like Vučić would lose in Serbia if he signed a final recognition, agreement which recognizes Kosovo, no matter what he gets back with the association of or not? What is the public mood, the mood in the streets of Serbia? And I know I'm asking a tough question here because I don't expect to have spoken to everybody in Serbia. But nevertheless, what do you think that can be lost for a politician like Vučić if he agrees to recognize Kosovo?
The only thing the politicians in Belgrade should be concerned is the security. If there are you mentioned some of the influences that may also lead to insecurity on the streets of Belgrade. If this is the outcome, I believe that none of the politicians would opt for creating insecurity by signing a document.
Do you think there would be insecurity in this?
There is a lot of voices. We have also also to watch Montenegro and its example, how some of the processes evolved, and that's the reason why we have to go back to the dialogue that was initiated previously. That was the internal dialogue where we participated, I believe, 2 years ago, where also some other parts of the society, especially the church religious communities, were on the table and discussing. I hope that we can ask for maturity and some of the processes that are announced, that we will avoid them. Insecurity is something that citizens do not want. We're also experienced wars. We experienced the bombing. We experienced many of the things. Quite a lot of my people of my age were on the front in Bosnia and on other sides. So people have that negative reflection to insecurity, and we should also speak bluntly about these outcomes as something that we do not want to see on the streets of Belgrade. By having very strong control over media, unfortunately, I mean, if we speak about democracy, if we speak about elections, this is also giving the possibility for everyone on the table to claim that every outcome negotiated can be directly and openly said to the public. With such a large control of media, you really can control the media space, and also you can control the voices. The only thing that someone who is signing will lose is two-thirds majority, and I believe this is very healthy for our democracy. But
why would any politician do something to harm themselves and lose?
I'm not sure if you're, a politician in the region, whether you are happy with two-thirds majority, because there is no way out from very hard questions that are posed on the international arena. There are hard questions that are, with a good reason, are posed by the opposition and by the part of the society that's not represented in the current parliament. So we need that kind of voices. We need that kind of calming down of the situation, and as many possible talks in between different groups. Also the talk with the religious communities, especially the Serbian Orthodox Church, and talking on the cultural heritage on Kosovo, Serbian cultural heritage, how to evade any scenarios that will undermine or maybe endanger something that's on the soil of Kosovo and is part of some kind of, you know, we shouldn't also lose this narrative. We shouldn't lose the feelings of the Serbian population related to Kosovo from our side. So we also have to take it into consideration in order to move these things forward.
And before I give the closing remarks to René and Max, who have been patiently listening to us, Vetan, I want to ask you about the very also tricky question about the issue that Milan talked about, and which is what I believe is a Achilles heel of the whole conversation we are having about the dialogue right now in Kosovo, and which is the association of Serbian municipalities. Knowing that the expectations are, as Milan said, for Kosovars to implement this agreement, which they have signed. What if, to go back to the theme of this discussion, what if a future Biden administration comes in and asks for Kosovars to implement this, as did, I believe, Hillary Clinton when she was here last time, several years ago, asking Kosovars to fulfill their sides of the agreement that they signed. What do you think will happen then in Kosovo? And what do you think the leadership should do?
No, well, I think both Kosovo and Serbia need to be honest about what they want. It's entirely dishonest to sign an agreement and to say we will form an NGO, which the Kosovar narrative was going all the time. You don't go to Brussels to sign an agreement to form an NGO called the Association of Municipalities. A, because it doesn't make sense in terms of negotiations. B, because it's not an NGO. It would be a GOMGO, governmentally organized, non-governmental organization. And three, it would be entirely dishonest towards the other party, which had high expectations of what it meant by the association. The association is a territorial autonomy for the Serbs of Kosovo, without Serbia recognizing the Republic of Kosovo. So this is something that Serbia has to be honest about in talks with Kosovo, and saying it's not, even if we get the association, it's not that we will recognize Kosovo, which is, I think, what Vučić is saying. And I think we have to accept this as the truth coming from Serbia, which is Serbia will not recognize Kosovo, and despite getting the association of municipalities. Kosovo, on the other side, needs to be honest with Serbia and saying, look, we are not going to give you a territorial autonomy. We were tricking you. We were saying this is an NGO because A, we were not creative enough, or B, we did not have sufficient intelligence to develop a better narrative than that. If in a situation in which a President Biden comes and says, you have to go through these motions, I think both Kosovo and Serbia need to sit down and say, look, is it about motions or is it about fulfilling the needs of the population? If it's about fulfilling the needs of the population, of the Serbian identity, etc., let's see how we balance the needs of the Serbian identity in Kosovo, the Serb people, of the Serbian identity in general, national identity, of the Serbia's religious identity, and the functionality of the Kosovar state. These needs to be balanced because the Kosovo constitution as it is already on the brink of dysfunctionality. And the Association of Municipalities, even if the Kosovar leadership wanted to do it, would simply crumble the whole structure of the constitution. So this is a serious issue. It needs to take away the emotional side out of it, which is, you tricked me, I tricked you, or things like that. We need to sit down and say, is this really the deal maker? Is this really something that Serbia will be satisfied with and will recognize the Republic of Kosovo because of that. Is this something that Kosovo thinks is really such an important issue for Serbia and the Serbian people in Kosovo and the Serbian identity in general and development in the region, that it's something that it has to engage in? I think it's not actually Serbia's fault. I think the Kosovars were not serious enough in entering this negotiating process, and entered the negotiating process saying, well, you know, we'll accept it today, and then we'll somehow forget about it tomorrow. But you cannot. It's infantile, I would say, what happened in the Brussels process. And a lot of it has to do also with lack of unity and lack of consensus in the Kosovo side. The Brussels process was the only negotiating process in which the Kosovo parties in power and in opposition did not form a consensual approach.
Milan, I would like to end with you whether you see, precisely because you mentioned the association, and if you are part of civil society and just think with this open society type mindset, what is the compromise if you hear the concerns that Kosovars have, that the main concern is that no part of the Kosovar society wants a third level governance, a third regional level. You must imagine how small is Kosovo. It has a local and central governance, and suddenly it is where it is going to have a complication, a completely new system of governance, which is a third regional level. That is what bureaucratically breaks the constitution of Kosovo. Is there any other way that Serbs, you think, could be satisfied in terms of having their rights, as Veton said, accomplished without having to establish a third level governance?
Well, it's as usual, I get very hard questions from you, Jeta. But it is very hard to imagine that some things that were signed and that Belgrade will drop off during the negotiations. We're talking, and also I think we should be frank on some other processes in the region. I would remind you on the role of Serbia in negotiation, the peace of also in Rambuje and many others, where we didn't have this honest will of Serbia to negotiate. We should also take lessons from the peace negotiated. We'll have soon anniversary of Dayton Agreement, and later on the Paris the signature in Paris. These are the lessons where we learned how postponing putting all the issues on the table will undermine the possibility of citizens to normalize their lives. Not to run away from your question, I doubt that the Serbian government or Serbian citizens would accept any form of guarantee of human and minority rights of the population. We also spoke with our colleagues from Bosnia. If you analyze it from any kind of constitution or any other way, there is no possibility for Northern Kosovo to be another Republika Srpska and obstructing the coherent Kosovar policy. So there is no, we cannot draw any kind of parallel from something that's negotiated, Association of Serbian Municipalities and Republika Srpska. So I think we should be as frank as possible, as open as possible, and to explain to public what are the red lines, and that there is also on the other side quite a lot of not just emotions but rational thinking on the conflict and how to end it up after, if we believe, this guy, 400 years, if we believe future president, it's much more
Okay,
realistic.
so are you saying, let me also ask then more directly, if Kosovo signed if Kosovo implements the Association for Serb Municipalities agreements fully with executive powers as signed, do you think Serbia will recognize Kosovo then?
We believe that on the international scene, that is after the election in the US regaining its position. United Nations will be a bit different, I believe, from the 2021 than they were in the last 4 years. Recognition of Kosovo, and also not undermining the possibility for Kosovo to be recognized and to get a seat in the UN will be something that will be something that can be on the table for Serbia. So not direct recognition, but also allowing for Kosovo to have a seat within the UN. We're talking about two Germany scenario, and many others that are now circulating, but we have to be as realistic as possible and to think about the common denominator and to think about common challenges. I would remind you that recently we also have the COVID under our doorstep, and there are some agreements that the countries are signing at the moment related to fighting together these. We saw also some solidarity in the region when we have bigger challenges that are really on our doorstep, and I hope that from these Besim we'll learn what Besim is, and to learn how we can support each other. We're too small. I think Serbia is also very small compared to the nations that are part of the EU. Kosovo is also very small, so we should learn how to be as present as possible. Visegrad Group is a good message. I think that at least some of the positive waves are coming from Bulgaria to the region. But I hope that we will not follow the example of Visegrad Group, so that we drop rule of law after 10 or 15 years.
Okay, I want to hear you, Max, before we go to Pristina.
Yeah, thank you. For me, there have been three key words in the conversation that I was following and we had between Pristina and Belgrade in our way today. The first one is opportunity, very important word for the American way of looking at things. Veton Soroy said that Trump was a disruptor, but that the US are indispensable for stability in Europe and also for this dynamism and the prospect for solving Serbia-Kosovo dialogue. So I think there is an opportunity now that we can align the European and the American initiatives to push forward and to find a way forward. And the second keyword was trust, poverenje or besim, as we have learned here today. Sometimes, from my observation in Belgrade, this prospect of the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue is seen as a very painful prospect. It is going to be painful to make concessions and to give something. And the perspective now, unfortunately, seems to be, if it's painful for us, it has to be even more painful for the other side before we can say it's a deal. And this is the wrong perspective. We have to change this, and their trust building will be most important. And the third keyword is democracy. We have seen a victory of democracy, and we will have a Democrat in the White House soon, and we will need more democracy here in Serbia and maybe also in Kosovo in order for this process to work out. And we as Friedrich Ebert Stiftung are here to support all these three things: opportunities, poverenje, besim, and of course, democracy.
Unless the two panelists have any final thoughts, which you can tell me on chat, I will give the floor to René to finish this debate today.
Thank you very much, Jeta, and thank you, Max. I couldn't have summarized it more beautifully. And I would just like to add that, as Max has pointed out also at the beginning, that Friedrich Ebert Foundation is here in the region in Kosovo for 20 years, and in Serbia even more than 20 years. So for me was the question looming when I listened to you, Beton and Milan. Okay, what about the track 2? We've been discussing a lot on the track 1 negotiations, the different implications on the US election, but that is a task for us also ahead. So it's not just an analytical, not just an academic debate, but of course it takes time and effort, as Max outlined, to build that trust. And what can be done not just in high-level meetings, either virtual or some summits, but what can be done in crafting very meaningful connections in everyday life in communities where Kosovo and Serbs come together. So for that, I would also like to underline what Max said. Now is a time of opportunity, and thank you very much for this very engaging discussion. And until next time, thank you.
Thanks very much to all of the panelists, Veton, Milan, Rene, and Max. I really enjoyed this conversation, and what I took out from it especially is that basically the spirit in which the Biden's victory is expected to bring the best in us. And by in us, I don't mean just the hope that we have of Biden changing the tune throughout the entire world and to speak more for freedom, peace, and science. But also what I heard and took away from this is that we expect a lot. We expect a lot also new leadership from Merkel and Macron to lead in the conversation and the dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia. And maybe this troika, because we remember that troikas used to work in the past between these two countries, Macron, Merkel, and Biden may be able to finish off this never-ending frozen conflict.
If I may end up, you missed one part, and that's us, people who decided to live in Serbia and in Kosovo, and to rely much more on us and the capacity of both societies.
I agree, Milan, and thank you very much for just reminding us how actually you think the other levels of society, the cooperation between other levels of society is important, because for way too long, this last decade has been actually, seen regress in terms of civil society and economic and other forms of cooperation, which used to be much stronger before. So I take away that the dialogue does not need to be dominated only by ego of leadership that leads these two countries, but it needs to be much broader, and ingrained in the grassroots of people of Kosovo and Serbia, for there not to be any disruptions, because what you mentioned in terms of security, we do not want to see. We do not want to see full streets of protest and fighting in Pristina, which we used to have after in the previous time recently, not very long time ago, and lots of insecurity in Belgrade either. So I take away that also from this conversation. Thank you for participating, and I look forward to future conversations with all four of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
We're offline? No, the meeting is over. Okay, fine, all right.
Super.
Yeah, it was good.